Croatian person, we got
Hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for, we hope, for the first of probably a few forums. I'm Michelle Mussel. I'm standing in for Delilah Snell, who, with Evan, made this happen. This is in partnership, this forum today is in partnership with Craftcation and KCRW. And any of those who are going to be tweeting during this forum, we're using the hashtag #FoodActForum. And everyone should have hopefully gotten a Craftcation postcard. If not, there's more outside as you leave. But for everybody that's attended today, we're giving a 10% discount on your registration for Craftcation. Craftcation is going to be held this spring. It's the second year. It's an amazing conference for craft to do it yourselves as well as food crafters. We have a separate track for food and we have a separate track for crafts. We've expanded the food track this year. So if anybody who has either started a small food business or thinking of starting one, this is an amazing, amazing conference for you to attend. Also too, the discount code that you would want to put on your registration is Food 2013. I think that hopefully that's very easy to remember. But yes, Food 2013 for tweeting, hashtag #FoodActForum. Okay, now Kevin Kleiman.
Hi, everybody. I want to thank all of you so much. I know this is a subject we're all really excited about, and we're glad this is happening. Before I start, I want to introduce my brain trust for the day. Richard Sanchez, some of you may have heard, it aired on my show this week. I did an interview with Richard earlier this week, but what's amazing about this new law is that things are so dynamic, things are already changing as we're sitting here. Richard is the head of environmental health here in Orange County. And then Karen New is also with environmental health. She is the head of program managers, right?
I'm a program manager.
A program manager. So you have policy, implementation, yes? I think it's really important before we start that we start by saying that the health department is often viewed as an adversary to those who want to produce food, and they're really not. They're here to protect us. So I just thought it might be a good idea to remind everybody or tell people for the first time, if you don't already know, what the health departments, the county health departments are tasked to do. So Richard, if you could just...
Thank you, Evan, and thank you for that comment. Yes, I know that sometimes we are viewed as a bureaucrat that stops you from doing what you want to do, but hopefully, at least in Orange County, we're trying to work with food businesses as a partner in that both of us want food safety. We don't want people to get ill. You don't want people to get ill. We don't either. So in addition to this new bill, which you're all interested in, the home-based food bill, we're the ones who do all the inspections at any retail facility. So any restaurant, market, temporary food event, certified farmers market, any place that sells food to the public, we go out, either we do an inspection or we talk to the operator to make sure that they know what they're doing so they don't give a product to the public that may cause them to get ill or that is adulterated in any way. It's important to, and that's just one of the programs that environmental health does, but it is our biggest program. In Orange County, we have probably over 20,000 food businesses, and so we have inspectors every day out there doing inspections on these various businesses to make sure that they're doing things correctly. It is important to note, though, that we can't be at these businesses all the time. So the approach we take in Orange County is we educate the food operator so they do the right things when we're not there. And so hopefully today's forum will also be in that vein where the hope is that we provide the education on food safety issues specifically so that when you do your business, you'll be doing things the right way.
Can everybody hear? Yes. Is that okay? Excellent. Before we get too far into it, I also just want to do some thank yous because I know if I wait to the end, people are in a hurry to get out. And I really want to thank John Spiak from the Grand Central Art Center here for donating this space. It's really wonderful of them to do it, and we're really grateful. And for all the staff who is helping us by recording it and giving us these mics. I want to do something. I hope you'll bear with me. If the two of you could shut your eyes.
Literally?
Yes, literally. I would like to ask the audience, how many of you are already making food? Okay, put your hands down. You can open them. A lot.
Yeah, I'm glad you did that.
A lot, like more than half of the room.
Sure.
As a chef restaurateur who's been involved in having to go through countless health inspections, I just think this is a really interesting process to watch. It's interesting to watch a process spring up from the beginning and go forward, because it's almost impossible to learn everything you're going to know in one shot. It's a constant process of education. And the first foray into the education about microbiology and everything that you need to know is a commitment. It's a real commitment. So we all know that people have been making food at home and giving it away to friends. And until this great guy, Mark Stambler, up in Los Angeles, who's a baker, built this incredible wood oven in his backyard, started making truly extraordinary bread and selling it, actually wholesaling it to different small businesses in Silver Lake who would then sell his product. He was basically ground zero for somebody who got cited for doing this, as did the venues who were selling his bread. And instead of just turning around with the tail between his legs and feeling unbelievably bitter, he decided, well, why can't I do this? And so Mark was really the first one to start the conversation with his councilman and eventually the state to come up with this new cottage law. Already 32 states in the US have a cottage law bill, so we're coming to it a bit late, which is sort of ironic considering that California has many more vegetables and fruits than these other states. So the pent-up demand for people who want to make things and sell them but aren't big enough to deal with a co-packer or to be able to have the financial wherewithal to rent a space and do it like that will now have the opportunity to start small in your own home. But it raises a lot of questions. And I would say my first question is going to be, if the two of you could sort of tag team and just let us know, how does it work? Is somebody going to, if somebody wants to do this in Los Angeles County or Orange County or Riverside County or San Bernardino County, is the law going to be really different from county to county?
That's a good question. And in the earlier part of my conversation, what I was going to also mention is there was some publicity for this event, and it talked about Orange County and what you need to know for Orange County specifically. And the interesting note is that the food laws, cottage food bill specifically, is the same across the state. There is no County of Orange food law. It's a state of California food law, and we have made no changes to that. We have what's called Cal Code, which is the food codes for California specifically, and it's the same for every county, every city, up and down the state. So the hope is that there will be consistency across the state in the way it's implemented. especially since it's a new law. And there is a conversation that goes on with the environmental health departments to that end, to make sure that we have model guidelines that we can all use to make sure we implement it in the same fashion.
Let's say that I'm a person who lives in a county that hasn't done any outreach yet and doesn't seem to have any answers on their website. Does a home cottager, does a cottager have to be licensed in their county residency?
Every environmental health agency is responsible for their jurisdiction. So it's typically the county, but in Southern California we're a little bit different. There are 3 cities that have their own health departments: Pasadena, Long Beach, City of Vernon. They have their own health departments. So if you're in any of those 3 cities, there's one city, Berkeley, also has their own health department up north. But if you're other than in those cities, you should go to your county and deal with your local county, because they're the agency that's going to be issuing the permits, the registration, so you can operate.
Okay, what will be the first step? Is there a registration? And is there a fee with the registration?
It varies. So, and that's a very good question. And I'm going to let Karen answer that question, because it depends on what you're going to be doing.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming and having me. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm. Keep it really close to your mouth if you're a low talker.
How's that? Thank you. So, shall I kind of go through the different classes? Would you like me to
Yeah,
go
I
over
guess
that?
first
I can do that.
let me prompt you a bit. Will there be 2 different tracks for someone who's producing for wholesale and someone who's selling directly to a consumer?
Yes. So there's 2 sections of the law. One addresses what we call direct sales, and one addresses what we call indirect sales. So if a person is selling, any of you are selling directly, for example, out of your house itself, at a certified farmer's market, at a community event, at a store that you own, then there's a registration requirement. And that has lesser requirements compared to if you're selling indirect, which somebody might refer to as a wholesale. So in the second type of permit, the second type of operation, there's actually a permit required and an inspection involved of the home. And that is if you are going to be selling to somebody who then resells it. And that would be like the Mark Stambler example, where he was making bread in his home, selling it to restaurants, and then they were, in turn, were selling their bread, like if you were to buy bread at a market. So those are going to have to get a permit, and they will actually get an annual inspection in the home. And the law was intentionally trying to keep things as simple as possible, and that's why for the direct sales, there's only a registration. You give us a lot of information about food, where, when, all of that information. We take a look at it, we work very closely with you, and then we register you. And then we re-register you every year, but there's not a site visit at the home unless there's a complaint or a problem that comes to our attention.
And to do this, to do the registration, is it possible online?
We have all the forms online, and yes, all the ones that are coming in so far, people are downloading our online form and either hand delivering or mailing, and we have a person in our office who's going through all of those. And it's been a bit of a learning process for us too, and so as we start to go through those, we're getting a greater understanding of the law and some of the requirements, and different kinds of foods come to us that we're not always familiar with, and we're working through that process very well.
Okay, so can you give us an idea? I know you're not quite, or maybe things have changed since we talked earlier in the week, but could you give us an idea of what the fees will be both for the registration and for the permit?
At this point, what we're doing is we don't have a flat fee established, because that takes some action through our board offices. So we're charging an hourly rate, I have to look it up, $25.75 for every 15 minutes of time it takes for us to do the paperwork. And we're anticipating can't ever see us going over 2.5 hours on the review. They are taking a little longer than you would think, because some people do lots of different kinds of foods, and then there's a lot of review and questions and back and forth on that.
And my understanding is that the fees from the permits and the registration will then go to underwrite the greater number of inspectors that you're going to have now.
Well, that would be our hope, that we would then be allowed to increase our staff. I mean, right now we don't have a lot that have come in, but based on this room, I think we're going to be getting a lot. And so all of our fees are designed to simply cover our costs. We actually aren't allowed to make a profit, and they're designed to cover overhead, our staffing, rent, everything, cover that process.
Okay, so let's get to the list, because I, of course, ran to the website, you know, clicked on the list of allowed foods and saw that my preferable food was not on the list. Tomatoes, maybe we can talk about that later. But why don't you take us through the list and give us the rationale for what foods have been allowed for people to take at home.
Just in terms of a big picture, the list is intended to have only non-potentially hazardous foods. That's a term used in the Health and Safety Code, and I'll explain that. Essentially foods that don't have to be refrigerated or kept hot in order to keep them safe. So an example of a potentially hazardous food would be a steak, any kind of meat, milk, you know, the kinds of things you keep refrigerated, or kinds of things you keep hot. So there's a whole list of foods. Should I just go ahead and go through those foods?
Yes, I think you want to hear,
Sure,
right?
yes. All right, so I'm just going to read it right out of the law. And all of this, of course, is available on our webpage. So, and we have a handout. So the handout is a one-page. I didn't have room to put on all the foods, but you can find this also on our webpage. So we have baked goods without cream, custard, or meat fillings, such as breads, biscuits, churros, cookies, pastries, and tortillas, candy such as brittle and toffee, chocolate-covered non-perishable foods such as nuts and dried fruits, dried fruit, dried pasta, dried baking mixes, fruit pies, fruit empanadas, and fruit tamales, granola, cereals, and trail mixes, herb blends and dried mole paste, honey and sweet sorghum syrup, jams, jellies, preserves, and fruit butter that comply with standards described in Federal Code of Regulations. So this is going to get to the potentially canning part of the requirements. Nut mixes and nut butters, popcorn, vinegar and mustard, roasted coffee and dried tea, waffle cones, and pizzles. Am I saying that right? Pizzelles, thank you. I actually wasn't very familiar with those. That is a complete list of foods. And that list can change.
It's going to change.
It will change. The State Health Department actually is charged with updating that list.
So, okay, let me throw you some curveballs here. So, first off, chocolates, truffles, chocolate truffles.
That would be a chocolate, yes?
Well, chocolate truffles are made with butter and cream usually.
Yes, but if the raw ingredients are things that have to be refrigerated, but then the final product doesn't have to be refrigerated, then you're fine. A cake is another example. And a muffin, often there's an egg in cakes and muffins, sometimes milk, so.
Okay, so what about a canned product like lemon curd, which has eggs in it, but it's highly acidified from the lemon juice?
Probably okay. It's going to be hard for me to answer all the food questions because we are still spending quite a bit of time investigating those questions ourselves.
Yeah, I would imagine. Or maybe, do you have a microbiologist on staff?
Actually, and I know you have somebody in the audience who could potentially answer these questions, but in the law that we use, it actually gives the pH where if it's a pH of that or less, then it's considered safe. It also gives water activity as another example of, okay, so what does bacteria need to grow? It needs the right pH and it needs water. So if you remove water, they can't multiply to cause people to get sick. If the pH is so acidic that they can't multiply, it won't make people sick. Examples of low water foods are jams. The water doesn't move around a lot. There's not enough water for the bacteria to grow. It can't grow mold, but that's a whole different topic. And acid foods, lemons, tomatoes are very acidic. If those are a primary ingredient, often it does meet that acid requirement.
Interesting. Maybe I will be happy. Karen, you were
Oh, I can add, we had some foods come to us that we did have some questions about, and there is a process where a person could have it tested at a lab to see if it meets those two criteria, if we're not sure.
a private lab.
Yes.
Okay. Are there going to be, so for people who are just going to be selling at like artisan fairs or at farmers markets or direct to consumers, maybe online, will there be any inspections for them?
If they're selling directly,
Yeah.
no inspections of the home in that situation.
So if we're going to sell to someone else who's then going to resell it, then there's going to be a home inspection. Will we get a letter grade to put on our windows?
I'm sure you'd love to talk about that, Richard.
LA County, San Diego County, Riverside County, San Bernardino County. I just named every county that surrounds Orange County. Uses a letter grade. We don't use a letter grade.
Okay.
Orange County does not letter grade their facilities. We do issue a pass inspection seal, and if you're a restaurant owner, you know this, but we actually don't issue that. And it's just all joking aside, on the posting, this is not actually considered what's called a food facility. It's another one of those terms that we use a lot. A food facility is a restaurant market, certified farmers market. These were intentionally not a food facility, but they still have requirements they have to meet. But one of those that they don't have to meet is the posting.
But in a way, they will be posting because there's going to be a labeling requirement.
Correct.
So why don't you talk a little bit about the label and what will be required on the label?
So just like labels you see at the supermarket, some of the basic information would have to be on the product, the name, whatever it is, like, what do we have a second ago? Truffles, chocolate truffles, the ingredients in order by weight, who makes it, and the address.
So that means you're going to be putting your home address on the label.
Yes, and that's come up. We did have somebody who wanted to put their web address on their label, and as long as their home address was available via the web address, we were making an allowance for that. All right, because the law for commercial facilities has some similar allowances that if you can obtain the address easily, then you don't have to put your full address on the label.
And you understand there's logic behind that.
Sure, it's traceability. It's in case of an outbreak, in case people get sick, you need to be able to go back to the source. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, I oversee our foodborne illness investigation program, and the biggest challenge is traceback. You would think it'd be very easy to find out where a food product came from, but even commercially made products can be hard because they go through several hands and many different handlers and many different venues before it gets to its final place, and so traceback is very important.
So maybe this will be even easier for you.
Possibly. And then there's also a requirement that says it was made in the home. There's a requirement for that on the label.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, that's so interesting. So using the words homemade will actually have meaning.
I think it's actually very specific.
It's more
on what-
specific.
yeah.
I want to get you the exact word.
Made in a home kitchen.
Made in a home kitchen, in 12-point type.
That's the only thing, yeah, and that's the only thing that has that point type requirement.
And on our webpage, on our informational packet, we actually have a sample label. Oh yes, our web address, ocfoodinfo.com.
It's very easy to navigate to, I have to say. Also, we have handouts that we got from the OC Environmental Health that we're going to give out at the end. That will have all the links and everything I expect. I have to ask you this. When all of you realized that this was going to happen, were you particularly apprehensive about what it was going to take to police this?
I can speak on behalf of maybe the whole state only because as the director I talked to all the other directors up and down the state, and it was a mixed bag. There was some who absolutely embraced it, who saw it, came from other states and knew that this was a trend that was coming across the US, and so it's, it finally got here to California. It's about time. There were others who were a bit apprehensive because of the difficulties, as Karen mentioned, sometimes when we have an illness and doing an inspection. And just quite honestly, I think there's a little bit of apprehension in going into a person's private home. We go into restaurant kitchens, I should say, and even those, if you're a restaurant owner, you probably know this, you feel very proprietary about it. This is your home. This is something you feel very passionate about. And so even entering those is sometimes difficult because we unfortunately are in the position of telling people what's wrong. We try and do what's right too, but sometimes it's about what's wrong. Imagine going into a person's home and doing that. So there is apprehension that we're going to have staff going inside of people's private homes.
Also, so much of what a food facility, a restaurant is inspected for doesn't really pertain only to the food. It's the flooring, the walls, the coving. What will home kitchens be inspected for?
And that's a very good point. As you mentioned, restaurant commercial kitchens have to meet very stringent criteria, not only for food handling, but structurally. In terms of cottage food, you're not going to have to go out and buy a commercial hood, get a commercial oven, If you have a way to keep foods cold in a refrigerator, what you have should be sufficient. I'll let Karen go a little more detail about that.
The law is very general, and we're looking at very basic things. It has requirements such as, while food is being made, there should not be children or pets in the kitchen during those points in time. And it talks about very basic hand washing. There really isn't a lot of requirements beyond simple food handling, and there's no structural requirements like floors, walls, and ceilings like you would see in a commercial restaurant. So, in fact, there's even a provision that the law doesn't want to see commercial style equipment, because this is intended for people actually using their home kitchens, not putting a commercial kitchen into their home.
Okay, that's really interesting. When we talked a little bit about this, part of when I was being inspected at the restaurant, part of what made me respond either positively or negatively to the inspection was knowing that the person inspecting me really knew about the food and knew what was required to make the food safe or not safe. And the experience I related to you was, you know, I once had a health inspector who was horrified that the clams were alive. And I was in this really uncomfortable position of having to tell the health inspector that the clams had to be alive, or else we weren't allowed to cook them, to serve them. So are your people going to be trained on a type of food that previously they never really had to worry that much about?
You know, again, very good point. Typically, the way we do that sort of education is through our organizations where we engage the industry. In Orange County, and every county has this, where they have what they call an advisory council, where we invite restaurant owners, tell us what's going on. We're seeing a lot of trends. You know, we've seen the yogurt trend. We're seeing now it's locally the slow food movement trend, artisanal foods. That's very big right now. And we learn about these things by engaging in conversation, a dialogue with our restaurant owners. We don't have that kind of situation right now with cottage food operators. It's in its infancy. But we hope to develop that sort of relationship where it's a dialogue, and somebody like Stambler, who was very active politically in making this move forward, will continue to be what's called a stakeholder that can provide information to local health departments on, hey, this is a food item that you may not have heard of. It's not a potentially hazardous food, because that's probably where the rub is going to be, is the inspector not knowing that's not a food that's going to grow bacteria. How do I know that? And so we need that kind of education. I'm asking the people in this audience if they're interested in it from Orange County, to become engaged in that conversation.
And I would imagine the process of reviewing the initial applications is the first step for you of that.
Yes, we have a staff person who's reviewing all of these, and it's finding, she's having to learn about food products. She had to learn about ganache with her first package. Wasn't familiar with it, so, but it's not that, I mean, we're able to self-educate and get the information that we need for some of these products.
Okay, could we hand some of the questions? Any of you fill out questions?
Here, you guys want to pass the questions to me? If you have questions, read my writing. Here. Anybody else have questions they want to give me? Anybody need a card?
Let me start with Ernie. Do you have any questions? Because you don't have to write it down. Okay, hold on a minute. Stand up. I just want to introduce everybody in the room. This is just, Ernie, remind me what's your last name?
Miller.
Thank you. Ernie Miller is a master preserver educator in Los Angeles County. He has trained a whole generation of master preservers now working in Los Angeles, and he's been involved in a lot of discussions of what makes this food safe. He trains people on these issues.
So one of the things is when you are starting a cottage industry law and you fall within, say, the LA County Department of Health, you can only sell that product within LA County unless there's a reciprocity agreement with another county. Now, Los Angeles County has already made a reciprocity agreement with Pasadena, Vernon, and Long Beach. But is there any reciprocity agreement with Orange County? So that if I make something in LA County, I can sell it in Orange County. If somebody in Orange County makes something, they can sell it in LA County. And what's the status of that?
Yeah, it's actually not specifically reciprocity. What the law says is each county can decide on their own if they want to accept another county's product. So reciprocity would imply that we have to both agree, but really we only have to agree that we would accept another county's product. And at this point, that is our plan, to accept other counties' products in Orange County.
Orange County is. LA County has made a different decision.
Really? LA County is only going to accept LA County and those that...
And those other three
And those
cities.
other three. At this time, I think that it's, like, again, a dynamic program. I would check back with them, but at this time.
That answer your
We're
question?
asking you
Yes.
questions on a card.
Okay. This is an interesting question. Can we sell a liquor-based product? For example, bitters. A lot of people are making bitters.
I believe so, if it's in one of these other products on the list. So if it were in a chocolate or in a muffin, but is that the kind of product we're talking about?
No. No. Bitters are what it's what you add to a cocktail.
Yes.
It's like a
Oh,
spice
yes, okay.
for
I'm sorry.
cocktails.
Well, if it's a spice.
Yeah.
It's a spice,
But-
it's a spice beverage with alcohol content.
It has alcohol,
possible.
like
Spices are on the
vanilla
list.
extract.
Okay, spices are on the list, so it's possible.
It's akin to an extract.
We'd have to look at that more closely and look into that more.
My understanding of that, however, is that that would follow under the regulations related to the sale of alcoholic things. Therefore, it would not be a cottage industry food. Now, if you could make the case that it is some sort of extract or something, you have to look very closely at that. But that would be alcohol regulation, not cottage industry.
That makes sense. And that's a good time for me to at least segue into, there could be other regulations associated with your business, and so you always want to check with your local city, just make sure. I don't know if franchise tax board gets involved. There's a whole bunch of other potential, and I'm sure you guys have workshops, coming up that will talk about how to go into business. I mean, that's a whole nother element of this to keep in mind. So.
Okay. Oh. Under the law, are you allowed to do a home-based cooking class for a fee?
Cooking classes where the students make the food and then eat the food, we actually don't regulate, as long as people are eating the food that they make. So that would be home or even in a center like this.
Because then you have a stake and not making yourself sick.
Yes, we consider more of a private type of.
Everything has a logic.
That isn't really how we yes.
Okay.
We hope nobody who makes any food wants to make anybody sick,
Right.
themselves or anybody.
Right.
That's how I look at it.
So then the question goes on at these classes, are you allowed to sell food products that you make? Then yes. That would be the direct-to-consumer sales. If they're teaching a class in their home.
Yes.
And then they also wanted to sell some products.
Then at that point, they become cottage food. They would need to be registered, yes.
Does this law allow selling of produce?
It doesn't specifically mention produce. And we actually have had a couple questions come to us about products that are not on here. And right now, until we know more about the law, we would be saying no.
That's interesting. Who in the room asked that question?
I did,
And because you want to have a little produce stand?
because I grow produce and I have a lot of it.
That's really interesting.
I will say, and I can only speak for Orange County, but if we see a lot of things, we drive around the county too. And we see the, lemons for $1. And our staff is not going to spend time on a low-risk food like that. So, if you have It goes to volume though. Where we start getting them maybe involved is if you did advertising on a website or something like that and said, I have produce to sell. But if you're doing it for your local neighbors and it's produce only, you're not cutting it, and I know it really doesn't technically meet the standard of the law, but that is really a low risk food.
So would you still recommend to register?
It depends on how you're going to do your outreach to your customers. Do you have a sign in your front lawn? Or are you going to get a website? Are you going to do advertising? Are you going to get flyers? If you're going to do the latter, then you probably might want to consider getting a CFO.
Not yet. It's dynamic. The list is very dynamic right now.
Yeah, that's something that definitely should be added to the list.
Evan?
Yeah. Yes.
Actually, may I address that?
Sure.
It's something I'm familiar with working with the farmers market. A lot of people, grow a lot of their own food. They want to sell in the farmers market and stuff like that. That actually falls under the Department of Agriculture. And therefore, in order to sell in the farmers market, you have to be a certified grower, which means you have to go and get a license from the Department of Agriculture, not the Department of Health. And there's a certain number of requirements for that. And in fact, it was illegal to have urban agriculture in Los Angeles County until just 2 years ago when Silver Lake Farms helped spearhead a change to the law in LA County. I'm not speaking to Orange County and what the laws are there, to make it legal to become a certified farmer in your backyard. But you go through the Department of Agriculture, not through the Department of Health.
Okay. I like these questions. They're very interesting. Is there a limit to production size and quantities?
There is a dollar limit, annual sales. First year, $35,000, and then it goes up in 2014 to $45,000, and then in 2015 and beyond, $50,000 limit in sales, gross sales.
And if you're doing $50,000, what?
Seriously, get a kitchen.
Yeah, exactly. If you're doing 50, it's time.
You guys have really high standards for us.
Yeah, exactly.
Plus working. Kids, no problem.
Okay. Is an unattached structure considered a home kitchen?
It's supposed to be your dwelling unit. So,
So no kitchens and garages,
correct.
unless they've been
garages.
permitted by the city, right?
Unless it's
It's
legally a
legal,
kitchen.
like a living area of the home.
Okay. Are honey producers under the same regulation as people who prepare food? You mentioned honey.
They already make it.
Actually, that's Department of Ag also looks at honey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But didn't you, wasn't honey?
Honey
on
was
the
one of
list?
the items too, on the list, yeah.
Okay, yes. All right. Dehydrated vegetables are not on California's list, but a review of FDA and other states as well as the pH seems that dehydrated vegetables should be included as a non-hazardous food.
It would make a lot of sense. If you have dried food, why not
Yeah.
have dried vegetables? So hopefully that'll be a change that will come.
Will it be helpful to you to have people, for example, to put this comment in a letter form and address it to you?
It's actually good.
Yeah, I would actually, as Karen mentioned earlier, the list is held by the state of California, specifically by the California Department of Public Health. And if you go to their website, they actually have information about the training that you need to get for this, because they're also in charge of that. So I would go to CDPH, California Department of Public Health, and go directly to them and say, you should add this. And I think they knew that was going to happen. They started out with this list. They realized it wasn't inclusive of what probably will end up being on the list, but they had to start somewhere. So I fully imagine that next year we're going to see a totally expanded list.
Okay, let's talk about training. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, the handout has the link to CDPH webpage.
Great. So let's talk about training. In the restaurant world, we have to get certified by this thing called ServSafe, which means everybody who handles food has to go through a very particular kind of training where you study and then you answer questions. It's kind of like a little mini high school biology class. what kinds of training are cottagers going to have to do?
The law refers to training that's going to be given by State Department of Health, and it has to last no more than 4 hours. And what the state has decided to do is to accept the food handler card training that was already approved for restaurants a couple years ago. And on their webpage, they have a link, and there's a whole bunch of providers on that.
And you have that on our link.
And yeah, I have that available too. And it's actually, I believe it's only a 2-hour course. And it's probably will need some enhancing to be appropriate for cottage food, but that's what they're using right now.
I never took one that only lasted 2 hours.
Yeah.
I took like 8-hour
Well,
classes.
there's actually 2 kinds of training. So you're referring to manager certification, which every food restaurant, which none of this applies to you guys, but to the difference is, has to have one person on staff who has that. And then recently, just a couple years ago, the law changed to say then everybody who works in the restaurants also have this much shorter, simpler food handler training card. And then, but they still expected to work under somebody who's taken the CertSafe, which is a very good course. Yes, much more thorough than the kind of class we're talking about for these people here.
So as part of the permitting, they will have to show a completion of this class.
They have 90 days after they get registered or permitted.
Okay. I just want to exhort you too that this CertSafe certification, while giving you a lot of the initial information that would make sense to anyone preparing food, I also really encourage people to take formal classes with master preservers or people who have been making the kind of food you're interested in making for a long time. There are different issues, particularly when it comes to canning, than what is covered in CertSafe. Oh, okay. Wait, I'm not good. We don't know. How should we prepare for an inspection? Put the dog in a separate room.
First step.
First step, remove. I mean, people will be notified. These aren't going to be spot inspections, will they?
We're typically, for you and your restaurant, you know it was unannounced. But we don't want to go to people's homes and knock on the door and no one's home, go back. So it'll probably be, unfortunately, because we want to see how the food is being handled all the time, at any moment. And that's the purpose of the inspection. But because of the dynamics of the home, they'll be scheduled.
Well, also because a lot of people work in regular jobs and will be gone all day. You're going to have the night shift inspectors.
And what
movie to be coming soon.
What we hope is that you will truly operate as you normally would, and that first inspection is not going to be you're shut down because you're doing this wrong. It's going to be, hey, you should be doing this instead of that, do this instead of that, and then we make sure on the next inspection that you're in compliance.
Are you planning on a yearly inspection?
We're legally only allowed to do one. However, we can go back if there's a complaint or we have some violations that require us to go back and check on.
And that would be for the indirect facility.
And it's only indirect, right? We don't even go to the direct sales. We don't go at all, unless we get a complaint.
Yeah, I mean, you know, when people, but then you think about it, how often have you been sick and then you called the restaurant? I was always amazed in the restaurant business how rarely that happened.
Make one note. A friend of mine in Maryland, I'm not sure how the laws apply here, but you know, he was out of his home kitchen, and just so everyone knows, in case you do get inspected, he said the first thing that happened was the guy who came in to inspect said, "Oh, where can I wash my hands?" And he pointed to the sink in the kitchen, and then he wrote that in as a violation.
Because they were supposed to wash their hands somewhere else?
He was supposed to wash his hands somewhere else, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think the law is that specific.
And like Karen said, that may be a Maryland thing because it's not addressed in California law. So, but you know, in a restaurant, they have to have a sink for specific purposes, only for hand washing.
So invite the health inspector to go to the bathroom to wash his hands.
That might be right.
What's the insurance requirement for cottage food?
don't have any information on that, but that's a good question to check with your
In my
homeowner's insurance.
personal opinion, anyone preparing food in this matter should have $1 million umbrella liability policy. I mean, you know, I'm not touching food that frequently since I closed my restaurant, but when I closed my restaurant, I knew I would be touching food and serving it to people occasionally, and I got myself a separate liability policy.
Evan?
Right.
Just because you brought it up, in regards to the liability, are they for obtaining it for a home? Because I know for a restaurant, you can do that, but is that going to be a, how do you list
Well,
that?
you can just call up an insurance carrier and say you want a personal umbrella liability policy. It covers you.
Thank you.
So if you ram into somebody's car or your dog bites somebody.
So does that mean you need to be a homeowner?
No, no, it's personal. It's not, you know. But that would be really easy to ask an insurance person. Right now, registration to sell at farmers markets is very difficult. Will this be relaxed with the new law?
Is that question about getting a permit to be at a temporary food booth next to the certified farmers market? Is that what the question is about?
Who asked that question? Most farmers markets, you're not allowed to sell the food where the prepared foods, where the produce is sold. It's usually...
You can prepare, but it's really hard. They're really stringent, especially in Orange. People will make you jump through hoops. I wondered with the new law, will it be relaxed?
The only thing I would say is, actually, what Bernie said is appropriate, because certified farmers markets are actually just the certified farmers market area, and we actually don't go into that area because they get the permit from somebody else. We make sure they have the proper paperwork from the food and ag, and that they're not doing things like sampling and other food handling, because in theory, it's only selling the vegetables, the produce, the whole product, with some exceptions like honey and jams and things like that. But when you go to a certified farmers market, typically you'll see outside of that area food sales of prepared food items. That's under our jurisdiction. So I guess my question to you is, are you a certified farmer market, ag, or are you under the health department?
It would be under the health department, like selling jams and that, but they're making it really hard for us to get into the market.
Is it because too many people are asking to get in, and so they basically have a line?
They didn't even say there was a line. They just said, well, we have one, we don't want another.
Yeah, that's different. Yeah, Ernie?
I'll just actually address this because this is something that's happening. My organization, the Farmers Market, Sustainable Economic Enterprises Los Angeles, is getting flooded with applications for the farmers market. And this law gives you the right to make things in your home. It doesn't mean that people have to buy it. And so a lot of local shops that do local artisan stuff are also getting inundated with people who want to sell their stuff and things like that. And some of the owners are actually getting quite offended by people who think, hey, I'm making this product, now legally you got to buy it. And the answer is no, they don't. And so you need to understand there's going to be a lot more people trying to get their bread and jams and jellies. And frankly, there's only so much jam and jelly people can eat. So it doesn't, there's all these other business areas. This law only applies to the health inspection. It doesn't apply to insurance or business licenses. It does have a tertiary touch to some of these things. For example, the employment requirement. You're allowed to have one full-time employee, which can be divided. You could have one person working, 5 people working 1 day a week or something, 8 hours a day, that sort of stuff. But there's a lot of other laws involved.
Thank you. That was a good way to answer that question.
Yeah. So, you're going to start your own business. You have to be everything. You have to be the marketing department, the accounting department.
And just on a side note on that, we have people come to us who've made their food and then come get their permit, and then they come back for a refund because they weren't allowed into the market. So the first step may be go to the market and see if you can get in, and then do the other 2 steps. We see that quite often. We try to tell people, we actually try to help people, have you gotten permission to get into the market? And so that comes up a lot, actually.
Wow. What about across state lines? I mean, like selling on a website. Would this be, again, like a different department?
that question came up last week and threw us for a loop. And so most recently, CDPH has come out with an interpretation that says you could sell on the internet, but you would have to hand deliver the product. And we really just haven't had an opportunity to look more closely at that to see exactly what that
It wasn't
says. So I don't have a complete answer on the internet sales part. For direct sales, and we're talking about direct sales.
This is direct sales.
This is direct sale from you to a customer, to an eater.
Did you want to?
Yeah, I've been involved in some of those conversations with some of the people involved in that. And right now, the basic answer is no, don't sell to people out of state on the internet. Technically, if you have a Class B license, that they would think that you can sell to anybody in the state of California with which your county has an agreement. So say if you sell on the internet to somebody up in Alameda County in San Francisco, that would be legal if Alameda County agrees that LA County or Orange County is acceptable. And you have a Class B permit, which is allowing indirect sales. But that's, this is still very, very new, so those questions, but right now they're saying really don't sell out of state.
And there's some logic to it. I know you got the reaction it did, but the logic is this is a small home-based business, and it was intended for the small home-based. If you want to become a big conglomerate, that's but really this is for that small home-based business. That's what the intent of this law was.
Was hot sauces on that list?
I don't think so, no. And does that go back to your tomato question?
Well, no.
Because you mentioned
Hey,
tomatoes.
listen, I have litmus paper. I know if my stuff is. No, it goes back to somebody who's making barbecue sauce.
No, it's not on here.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. If you have, well, this is a legal thing. If you have a DBA for your food truck and you sell, and that business for food, if you have a DBA for your food that you sell, and that business has a PO box for an address, can you use a PO box address on the label?
No.
It's all about tracing if somebody gets sick. If you have to imagine an inspector arriving at the PO box.
And let me just add, or somebody thinks they got sick. Not everybody who says they got sick, but either way, we have to investigate, we have to trace back, we have to find out if there was a problem. And that, to a certain extent, protects you. Because we do a very thorough investigation, and people make allegations sometimes because they misunderstand or for whatever their motivations are, and we need to be able to look into that thoroughly.
I just want to address the hot sauce question real quick, because there's a lot of people who want to make hot sauces and barbecue sauces. One of the things you'll notice that isn't on the list are pickles, fermented foods, these sort of things. These are all what are considered under California federal law acidified foods. That is, the food is not normally safe at room temperature because it doesn't have a high enough level of acid. Even if it's canned, you have to ensure that the acid level is high enough, which because of the way canning and stuff works, you have to ensure the proper pH. Because the state can't be sure of some of these foods, such as barbecue sausage, which may or may not be acidified enough, or hot sauces, they have to be produced in a licensed cannery, not a restaurant, not a food production facility, not a cottage industry home. So even though I make pickles and barbecue sauce and hot sauce at home and can it myself and serve it to my friends and family, I would not be legally allowed to sell it under the cottage industry law.
Wow. And this is the biggest slippery slope I see with this law. And that is also why I encourage you to get more education beyond the ServSafe certification. Because just taking canning classes, even if you don't, there probably isn't enough space in every county's master preserving class to, if everybody wanted to go through master preserving, to be able to certify everybody in this room. But at least taking classes, it gives you the issues. Because it's, you can't see a lot of this bacteria. It doesn't always have a smell.
Or taste it.
Or taste. They're lurking, like that horrible norovirus we're all afraid of now. Okay, so are there test kits available to test products for bacterial contamination?
That's not the approach we'd like you to take. testing it after is if you know how you handled it before, you know that it did not grow bacteria to the level to cause illness. And just so that you know, and you probably already know this, all food has bacteria, not enough to make you sick. The problem becomes when they multiply to the levels that cause illness. And that's called an infective dose. And some bacteria have very low infective dose. Botulinum, and that's a bad one. So you don't want that to happen. And that's not infrequent in canned foods, as Ernie was talking about.
And I'll just say, I've taken canning classes with Ernie, and I've learned, you know, and there are still foods that I will not make for myself at home because I haven't taken enough classes. I feel like I don't want to make a mistake, you know. I canned some beans, I'm still afraid to open that jar. We already mentioned that inspections once a year, unless you make people sick. Are there going to be particular requirements, like the inspector comes into the house and the refrigerator just looks too small?
No, it does not go into that level of detail. Okay. So,
I would say though, yeah, if it's so small that you can't store all the meat in the refrigerator, so you have it out on the counter, that's a violation, that's a problem.
But like counter space and all that, that was my question. So like, my place is really tiny. So is there any like storage area, certain amount of feet above, you know what I mean?
No minimums like that at all. Yeah.
No, but you know in your space what you're comfortable doing safely.
Sure, yeah. I
You
just
know.
was wondering if there was going to be regulations.
I mean, like, it's not going to be on the kitchen table with an adjacent chair, perfect for the cat to jump on,
Right.
and then jump on the table and eat the food.
And Bernie maybe wanted to say this too, but you'll know, because if you get to the point where you have to store food on the floor and you have a dog and the inspector
Right.
comes in and the dog's sitting on the food, that's not going to be good. So it's the common sense things like that that'll drive the level of food that you're preparing.
So here's the question. Why are the codes very strict on sinks, flooring, equipment, et cetera, for commercial business or restaurant, then so opposite for cottage food preparation?
And, you know, is a director of environmental health out there somewhere? Because that was one of the things that was mentioned is here we strive to have commercial restaurants and markets meet all these requirements, and these home businesses basically just take their home and turn it into a kitchen. However, this is meant for the small, as I mentioned earlier, it's meant for that small food operation. If you get to a point where you're getting big, then you gotta go get a commercial space and get all the required finishes and all that stuff.
And also, restaurants and food facilities of that nature are cooking a lot of food that is not on and will never be on this list.
Right.
You know,
Right.
food that you have to keep at certain
Low-risk
temperatures.
foods.
Yeah.
Right.
Are sprouted nuts and seeds considered safe?
They're generally considered potentially hazardous.
Wow.
Many are.
Well, all of us have heard the recalls of all different kinds of sprouts. Okay, I do smoking of nuts and other non-perishables. I can't do that in my kitchen, only outside. Is this allowed? Prep and packaging is done in the kitchen.
I don't know. I'm not sure. We have not had that question. So,
But Mark Standard bakes outside.
Yeah,
Actually, that's not true.
Oh, no?
That is not true. Mark Stambler, the man who got this law started and has a really beautiful outdoor brick oven, for purposes of this law, bakes his bread in his kitchen inside the home.
Okay. Well, that's good to know.
He specifically, you're not allowed to, the law does not allow outside, unattached stuff. So under current interpretation, the smoking would be a challenge, which is not to say that this law will not be changed in the future.
Very, very interesting. As an event planner that works with vendors selling products at my events, what are my responsibilities?
in other words, the event planner is bringing in the cottage food
Yeah,
operators?
like let's say it's like, yes.
I would have to say, like any business owner, you would be checking into the people that you work with and make sure that they're properly insured and that they would be doing things appropriately and they have appropriate registrations or permits. I'm sure event planners use many different subcontractors, and I think it would be the normal business practice to make sure that all their people that they work with are properly licensed and permitted.
So let's say you're an event planner and you do a community event that isn't as large as like Patrick is down here, but maybe has, let's say, 10 vendors. Should they go to the health department and get an overall health permit for it?
It actually is required for the event planners if there's more than one food booth. And it's not a hard process, and it actually helps keep things organized.
Okay, and are there any vendors in the room who are selling historic California products? Of course you are. Okay, see this woman after. Raise your hands again.
Right here. Anyone that sells California products, I hire a vendor.
Okay.
What does that mean?
Basically, it's historic events, so for things that would be sold during Victorian times or during the Rancho period of California. I'm desperate for local. Oh, I see.
It's really interesting.
Actually, I teach classes on historic food preservation at the Workman Temple Homestead in the City of Industry, Rancho period, Victorian period, 1920.
Can you give us some examples, please?
Food items.
Okay, give us an example of a Victorian food.
Canned products. Canning was invented in 1910, officially is announced by the French. However, it doesn't become home canning until John Little Mason invents the mason jar in 1858. Unfortunately, he's not able to popularize it. He patents it, but dies penniless. In 1881, the patents expire. The Ball Corporation in Upper New York State starts making ball jars, becomes wildly successful. By 1885, they're rolling in the dough, and that's how Ball State University gets started. So therefore, that's when canning really takes off, is in the Victorian age.
Amazing.
Wow.
Just amazing. Go, Ernie. Sure.
What was the question?
Craftcation.
Yeah.
I will be on the forum at Craftcation. I'm also on the implementation panel for the cottage industry law at the Small Farm Conference in Fresno, California, March 12th.
Carol, we won't be going there, but
Ernie and I will talk.
that'd be great. Great.
Can multiple businesses carry the same address? Like two friends using a communal space, like a home or a church?
Well, if it was a church, then it wouldn't be a cottage food business because it wouldn't be a person's home. So but if two people lived in a home and wanted to share that and have two cottage food businesses out of their home, I don't think that really meets the intention of the law. And they would combine, couldn't go over $35,000.
Combined.
So, but that question hasn't come up either. It's a really good question.
Well, you know how people are. The more of us get involved, the more questions there will be.
And that's what's been very interesting, because we were involved in the creation of this law, and then the very first week, there were things that we started to see that we didn't anticipate. And there's going to have to be some legislation to correct some things that are hard to understand sometimes.
So do I need to use separate equipment for my food products from my normal kitchen?
No.
No, not unless you're kosher.
Just to mention that the law does specifically state that you are not allowed to do normal food preparation when you are creating your cottage industry product. So therefore, you can't be using your mixer to make muffins for sale at the church and then be using it at the same time making muffins for your own personal use or something like that.
Well, more importantly, you can't be making the muffins while you're making omelets for the rest of the family.
Yes.
Yeah.
How on earth do they police
You
that?
have to think of it as a home office. There will be food preparation time. Is catering from home covered? No.
No.
I can answer that.
Yeah.
That will never happen. I don't think this question is covered for this forum, but how do you address piracy concerns?
Privacy.
Oh, privacy. There's no such thing as, I've done interviews on that, there's no such thing as food copyright. Privacy concerns.
I mean, there isn't really a way.
I'm curious as to in what manner.
Who asked the question?
I didn't ask the question, but it's one of my questions. I mean, if someone were to get sick, wouldn't they contact the health department?
Typically, yes.
So why would they, why would we need to put our home address for personal privacy purposes?
Great question. Some of the people don't like having to put their home address on the label itself.
I actually have a
There's
stalker.
concern.
I have a restraining order on some.
You don't need any more.
Yeah.
That is unfortunate that that's kind of modeled after the laws that we have regarding any other food operation of traceback, where we need to
But
go
with
back.
corporations, you don't put like the CEO's, address on.
In essence, you are, but you're everything.
Right.
The home is the business owner, the food maker, the seller, everything. So where they can parse out different parts of that. In a bigger corporation with a home-based business, it's a home base.
So it wouldn't
that's all
be
there
something
is.
that they could just get that information through the health department as opposed to putting it on our labels where they're being distributed?
When you say they're being distributed, though, in theory, it's the product that's how they find out where your home is, right? That's what you're saying.
Right. It's just a little more limited if it were to just be registered through the health department as opposed to being on the label where it's being.
Or could the health department
We
have
are
a
putting all the
directory?
registrations on our webpage
Right.
once we have a list together. So that same information is going to be posted on the web so that when people are an event coordinator or putting on a certified farmer's market and they want to verify that their vendors have a permit, and we do that with our restaurants too. All our restaurants are on the webpage. You can look
But
at
does it
any
have to
restaurant.
be your name, or can it be like a business?
You can have a business name, but it would still be the address where the food is prepared.
Right, but like in her case, it wouldn't be, her stalker can't look up her name and her address.
Yeah, it could be Julie's Cookies or,
Yeah.
or whatever. Yeah,
But it
the
would
name
have
can still be
someone
the business.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
And it
okay.
can be buried in your website somewhere.
Right.
Oh,
Okay. That's another.
Okay, this is a test of my ocular acuity, which I'm failing. Okay, this is a case in which the person already has a certified commercial kitchen and they have a retail food sales license, but they want to know if they make food at home as a cottager, can they bring it to their food shop?
Yes, they could.
Would it have to be packaged? We haven't really gotten into that, packaging.
They could, as long as they from their home and meet the same requirements, then they could package it and sell it in their restaurant. It's interesting on the packaging. The law doesn't say it's supposed to be packaged, but it says it has to be labeled. So in the case if it's being sold bulk in a facility, if the label's available, that's usually acceptable.
Okay, so it could be transported in a large container with the label on. Okay.
I think the law was visualizing only labeled packaged products and hadn't really anticipated the concept of people making muffins, taking them to their own facility and selling them out of a case. So, Ernie.
Well, actually, the law specifically imagined that because that was Mark Stembler's case. He's baking these loaves of bread, which were being sold in a couple of markets in Silver Lake and Echo Park, and they had them in baskets, as you would in a bakery. And so they do put the label in front of the basket, which has all that required information. And then when you get the baguette or the bowl, they put it in a bag, and that's it.
Yeah, that's exactly how you do it.
Okay, I think this is going to be our last question. I want to really thank the two of you for coming and spending this time. And I just want to encourage all of you to just really use common sense. And one of the reasons I'm still in the food business after 35, 40 years is because in this business you never stop learning. So just think of this as another opportunity to educate yourself about a new aspect of what you're doing. Be safe and enjoy.
And pick up a handout on your way out.
Yeah,
Business cards and handouts, or
business
PDF
cards and
cards?
handouts. And I'll see you at Craftcation. I'm going to be at Craftcation too.
So nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Good luck to you. Good luck.
That is a good question.